Thanks very much. What I'd like to do is tell sort of three stories of strategies that we've used around physician and ancillary governance to try to advance the development and implementation of our electronic medical record capabilities, primarily CPOE, in a community health system that has a predominantly volunteer medical staff and an interesting history. So our background is that we are a 4-hospital system, a total of about 1,000 beds, located in southern New Jersey, just across the bridge. We're the product of a merger in 1999 between 3 of the hospitals and 1 larger hospital. And that has left echoes of provincialism and some mistrust, both of the 2 medical staffs and of administration on both ends, that we had to deal with at the beginning. We also have a legacy of everybody needs to be involved in everything. Decisions are not usually made in a streamlined manner. We knew that we were going to face significant challenges. We had, in our EMR implementation, we had a very accelerated timeline, and we needed to find ways to involve the physicians and the ancillary staff, the nursing staff and ancillary staff, in decision making. And I want to just tell you 3 stories of how we did that. We can spend more time on whichever ones are most interesting in the question and answer 5 minutes if we have time. So the first was, how do we develop order sets? We understood from speaking to others that we were going to need about 150 order sets to go live with CPOE. We had none. It took us, for written order sets, it would take us about 9 months to get 1 order set through our governance process, and we needed to develop at a rate of 15 a month with broad-based participation, universal buy-in, and the opportunity to get everybody's needs met. So we started out by pulling together a small group chartered by our medical executive committees, 4 physicians, and then the 2 of us in an ex officio role and a chair, to help us design our governance structure. And this is what we came up with. It's going to be a little hard to see from there, but I'll give you the high points from here in just a minute or 2. And this worked very, very well for us, and it was very lean. What happens is that the order sets are nominated and go through our Clinical Decision Support Steering Committee. Is there a pointer? Probably not. Top left is the Clinical Decision Support Steering Committee. And I'm on a timer. They approve the order sets for construction. Order sets are made by a subject matter expert with support from the IT team, pharmacy, and some of the ancillaries. These are transmitted electronically to any stakeholder that the subject matter expert thinks is appropriate. That could be, that essentially was in many cases the entire departments of medicine, family medicine, and pediatrics. So we might have 200 or 300 people commenting on order sets. Well, having the opportunity to comment. In fact, comments were relatively limited, but this was all done in an electronic environment, and the comment period was 2 weeks. The order sets were also sent to the Medical Executive Committee and to this Clinical Decision Support Steering Committee, all made up of medical staff members. So they saw the process going through this 2-week cycle. At the end of 2 weeks, the cycle was closed. Subject matter expert took the input, finalized the order set, and it was presented to the Clinical Decision Support Steering Committee for their approval. They were the group that went into detail. The med execs never opened 1 order set, which was a major victory because medical executive committees tend to really get their hands all over everything. And what allowed that to happen was they appointed the CDS Steering Committee. They were involved in the circulation for those 2 weeks for each order set, and we hit the mark of 15 order sets a month for 10 months. So we went live with about 150 order sets. We had a doc in one of our meetings, as a measure of the success of this approach, say, you know, well, it's pretty obvious no physician was involved in this. This was at a full Department of Medicine meeting. And all his colleagues just looked at him and said, are you kidding? Did you not get his emails? I'm known as like the South Jersey email king. So it really has worked very well, and it continues to be how we will manage our maintenance of order sets and subsequent development. The next big challenge we faced was how do we resolve these sticky issues of things like telephone orders, verbal orders, DNR, home medication use, non-formulary use. This is the process we put in place. We had a group of 95 people. This is in a community health system, and the one thing we guaranteed is this group would never meet. This was all done electronically. We called it the Tuesday-Thursday Club. They would get a template. I'm about to show you one example. They'd get 2 or 3 templates every Tuesday. The answer had to be in by Thursday. They'd get the next set on Thursday, and the answer had to be in over the weekend. And we got through 39 substantive issues with absolute uniform closure by our steering committee of about 20 people with input from this 95-person group. This is what a template would look like, nothing fancy at all, but what this did was it kept conversation focused on points of disagreement rather than ratifying agreement throughout the process, which is friendly but a complete waste of time. What we did was we'd state the issue. In this case, it's home medications. We would state either recommendations or options depending on the stage of development of the process, and we would show where the issue had been discussed already. This is the roster of people who were involved. The blue are physicians, and it goes about twice that length down the side. So we had 60 physicians and about 35 or 40 allied health professionals, ancillaries involved. And the thing that really made this work well was that there were 4 votes. This was all handled just using Outlook. I mean, no incremental cost at all. Outlook and a couple of rules to route them to their own folders. And what we would put is you either approved, you would reject, which meant if everyone else approved it, you were okay, you could live with it. A conference call, which was called for a couple of times but actually never became necessary. That would be done if the template wasn't clear enough. I would have been personally hurt if that was the standing opinion, but it turns out they were all clear enough that there was no clarification needed. And then red flag, and this was the secret. Red flag said, I don't care who votes for this, I can't live with it. And remember, this is going out to 95 people. The key of the red flag was, if you threw it, you presented it to the executive committee. So you'd be the ones who stood in front of the VPs and explained why this was so bad that it couldn't go forward even though 94 other people had voted for it. We had a few red flags provisionally thrown, and they were resolved with further discussion. Nobody really had to bring it to steering. These things all went to the steering committee, and if you'll note, they were all watermarked with the date of approval that the steering committee went through it. This came up just the other night because we had a couple of nurses pushing back real hard on our verbal and telephone order policy, which is collaborative, is the way to put it. In other words, nursing will let us know who's abusing it, and then we go after them guns blazing, but the bias is towards accepting them if they seem to be appropriate. When we showed that template to the nurses in our clinical decision support steering committee meeting, they recalled it, and we kind of got everybody back on track. So it's a very effective, very efficient way with no meetings at all, and we got through 39 issues. We had genuine participation, lots of comments. The comments would be circulated, and everybody kind of got on the same page. We're doing the same thing right now, prioritizing 15 major IT initiatives for next year, IT/operations initiatives, and we're using the same approach and getting really good consensus in this 4-hospital dispersed system with broad-based participation. We have about 50 people working on that. And our organization's starting to get used to this way of doing business. Again, not one meeting will take place with this group. Finally, physician preparation. How did we train our physicians for CPOE? And we just went live about 6 weeks ago with Saurian. 100% adoption in those areas where it's deployed. We haven't deployed it in a few areas where technology doesn't support it, like pre-op and a couple of others. But all med-surg, all of pediatrics is up and running, and it's been full adoption, so this worked nicely. We had no classroom training. We thought we were taking a bit of a chance by doing that, but we really had heard from lots and lots of sources that classroom training didn't work well. What we did was we got a $300 copy of Camtasia, which is just one of several kind of video authoring software packages, and basically put together demos of the system functionality, things like telephone and verbal orders, home medications, how to modify a pre-existing order, the typical workflows in CPOE. We had 8 that were required and about 25 that were optional. Our med exec group was really stern on this, that if the docs didn't complete the 8 modules and go into our sandbox, and really it wasn't very strict, it was just logging in and noodling around a little, you were suspended. and it was no slack, just you were suspended. And we had about 300 who a week before live were in the queue to be suspended, and we had probably did suspend about 200 in a system that has a total of maybe 2,000 physicians on staff. And as you can imagine, most of those were docs who didn't come to the hospital very often. And some people resigned their privileges, which Medical Affairs was actually kind of happy with, because they'd been maintaining those folks mostly so the HMOs didn't have to credential them. So we used this basically high volume feedback, broad-based participation. Nobody could say they hadn't heard about it or didn't have the opportunity to be involved. We really pushed out, and something we were challenged with, we pushed out really fundamental and very controversial decision making out to operations. So it wasn't viewed as something held by IT, nor was it viewed as something held closely by administration, but rather there was very visible discussion, trackable, and things we could refer back to as issues arose. There was a real fundamental respect for clinician time in all of these approaches, which I think carried us a long way. Our docs have been willing to put up with some pretty substantial dislocations as we went live with CPOE. And all the time they recognized and would comment, hey, the preparation was great, and you guys really took care of our time. You didn't waste our time. We had a concept from the beginning to pursue really low-cost and efficient processes, not because we didn't have opportunity to spend money. We've spent plenty of money, but because we thought this was the most likely to succeed approach. And what we've learned is approaches which we found were sustainable and also built-in reuse. So all those video modules are available. There's like 30 of them that docs can refer back to, new members of the medical staff can use to prepare, and they'll be updated in the future to keep us current. So we've had a really interesting and somewhat unexpected experience with taking processes that could have really bogged us down and slowed us down a great deal, and found ways by thinking just a little bit outside of the box of ways of being both respectful of people's time and, in the end, I think, vastly more successful at gaining collective decision making and having the real authority to move forward on some of these challenging issues. Any questions?